Should you buy an annuity for your retirement? That's what we're going to answer today. I'm Elliot Apple, founder and financial planner of Kindness Financial Planning, and today we're talking about annuities, specifically immediate annuities. Now, there are a lot of different types of annuities out there. We can't get into all of them in today's video, but I want to talk about what would happen if you deposited a lump sum into an annuity and then that immediately started paying you out. So when I talk about an annuity today, we're talking about you exchanging money with an insurance company and them promising to pay you income, usually for the rest of your life. Now you can put different terms on this. You'll see if you run an annuity quote out there, sometimes they'll run for life with periods certain, and maybe that's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years, which just means that if you put money in and you die within that specified time period, it will continue to pay out. So if you did life with 10 years certain, let's say you died in year 5, it would continue to pay out an additional 5 years to your heirs. So what you're doing is you're removing some risk of you having to invest that in some way to create that income. You're giving that to the insurance company and saying, I don't want to worry about this. Just deposit the money each month into my bank account. So it's subject to the guarantee of the insurance company. What can they actually reasonably give you? And with a lot of insurance companies, they have pretty high credit ratings, so there isn't too much concern, but I think it's worth mentioning that you are exchanging this money to them and you're relying on them to pay that. So you're relying on them to be solvent throughout your life. People are often attracted to annuities because they like the guarantee, and I'm going to use air quotes here just because nothing in life is guaranteed, but they like that income source that shows up in their bank account every month. They might be worried about longevity risk, or maybe they are worried that a lot of people in their family have lived a long time. And with an annuity, the longer that you live, the longer you collect payments, the better rate of return that you're going to earn on that. So a lot of them buy them as a longevity hedge, or they're concerned about the stock market. If they're concerned about the stock market, they don't want to see the values go up and down. Sometimes they'll exchange some money, usually not all of it, but some of their portfolio to that insurance company for that lifetime income. I want to spend a moment talking about fees with the annuity, because when we talk about annuities, fees are often the first thing that comes up. And it is correct to say that a lot of annuities do carry high fees with them. The annuities that I'm talking about today typically don't carry any fees. You give the insurance company a certain amount, and then they exchange that income for you. There are no other fees. You can think about the fees as being embedded in what they pay you back, that they are earning money because the insurance company is getting your lump sum deposit, and what they're doing in turn is turning around and investing that in their accounts with the insurance accounts to help pay out your annuity income, as well as everybody else within that annuity business and potentially other lines of business for the insurance company. So they're doing what someone would do as an individual to help create that, but maybe in slightly different ways, just because they're not planning on any single one life. They are planning on lots of different lives with the different people who are buying these annuities. When we talk about annuities, we also want to talk about taxation. And this is a really important piece, because if you're taking, say, IRA money and you're making that into an annuity, the taxation is going to be very similar. Anytime that you take money out of an IRA, you don't have any basis in it, which a lot of people don't, it's going to be taxable as ordinary income. When you get income from the annuity that you purchased, that would also be taxable as ordinary income. Here's where things get a little bit different. Let's say you have a lot of money in your bank account, or you have a brokerage account, you want to cash some of that out for the annuity. You are changing the taxation slightly here. So let's say you take $100,000 out of your bank account, you deposit it with the insurance company, and then you receive payments. Well, if you had taken that bank account and deposited into a brokerage account, and then values grow, and let's say you held the investment longer than a year, those would likely be taxed as long-term capital gains, depending on what investment you make. When you put into the annuity and you start to receive income, some of that is going to be taxable as ordinary income. So there is a slight downside to taking what's called non-qualified money and then putting it into an annuity and receiving that as income. You are changing the tax structure with how you do that, and likely you'll end up paying a little more in taxes. Ordinary income versus long-term capital gains. For a lot of people, long-term capital gains are 15%. For some people, you can actually fall into the 0% long-term capital gains bracket. With ordinary income, you might be somewhere between 12% on the very low end to, who knows, 32% or higher. I work with some people who, between Social Security, pension, requirement of distributions, that can push them into a very high bracket. And so an annuity is sort of a forced taxation for them that maybe will actually hurt their tax picture. The other thing I would say about the tax piece is that annuity provides less flexibility because you're exchanging that and money's coming each month, which is the whole idea. you have less flexibility with Roth conversions or managing withdrawals, whether you're taking from brokerage, tax-free money, IRA money, maybe you qualify for healthcare premium tax credits. An annuity can mess with that just because you can't control where you're taking distributions from. The income source just gets turned on and then you're receiving that each month. So that's something to keep in mind before purchasing an annuity. Another downside to an annuity is whether you can get your money back. And oftentimes with the annuity that we're talking about, you're going to have a very limited window once you purchase it where you potentially could get the money back. We're talking about 20 or 30 days, maybe less. And then after that point, you're stuck. You're getting that income. So if you're exchanging, in the example earlier, $100,000, and let's say you wanted that money for, I don't know, an assisted living facility in the future, or a great vacation with your family, or a down payment on a new house, you gave up that flexibility. Now you are getting that income, but you don't have access to that lump sum anymore. There's not really an undo button when it comes to that. Now there are different types of annuities that we're not going to go into, but some of them you can put money in, and then you have the flexibility to decide when you want to annuitize it or when you want to take income from it. And in those cases, sometimes you can get the money back, but oftentimes those do come with higher fees and potentially high surrender charges, meaning if you surrender the annuity or say, hey, whoops, I changed my mind, I don't want this anymore, I want to give it back, you can get some of your money back. And usually there is a declining schedule. Sometimes it's 5 years up to 9 years. It all depends on what you purchased. There are theories out there and research that has been done that shows sometimes people want to essentially annuitize or create an income stream for their essential expenses. So maybe Social Security and pension income covers the majority of their spending, but they still need an extra, call it $10,000 per year, just as a random example. And they might put in enough money to create that $10,000 per year. That's an option to approach this. Some people do more, some people do less, some people never purchase an annuity. In fact, all of us in a way, or I shouldn't say all of us, many of us have a sort of form of annuity. And I say sort of just because Social Security could be thought of as an annuity source. It's income that we receive for life. And contrary to a regular type of annuity, Social Security usually has an inflation adjustment most years. And so that is a benefit of Social Security versus an annuity, where oftentimes we're not purchasing an annuity with an inflation adjustment. That can be a lot more expensive. We'll go into that detail further in this video. The issue with trying to cover essential expenses is the expenses at the beginning part of retirement. Let's say you're 60 or 65. That's going to look different than when, say, you're 75 or 85. And we just talked about how annuities often don't have an inflation adjustment. So they're not going to go up as all the costs of goods go up, which means in 10 years from now, that annuity is probably going to cover less and less, in which case you might need more retirement income from your investment portfolio or other assets to support your everyday living expenses. There are also arguments out there that if people annuitize certain expenses, they can take more risk on the portfolio side. I don't necessarily believe this all the time, just because I think a lot of us have that natural risk level that we're willing to take with our investment assets. And even if we knew we're getting income every month from this, it might still be uncomfortable if, say, you have $1 million in an investment portfolio or $2 million. And let's say that you're willing to go all stocks now, just as an example, because you have income sources regularly coming in that cover all of your expenses. I don't know necessarily that someone that has that coming in would say, hey, I have $2 million today. I went through the great financial crisis and my portfolio value is worth $1 million or less now because the value got cut in half. I don't know if we're naturally inclined to stay the course in those situations. I think maybe you could take some more risk, but I don't think it's a lot more risk, just based on my experience. Now, I may be totally wrong. You might be that person that says, if all my expenses are covered, I can take as much risk that I want with the portfolio. And that is sort of the research out there, that if you have this income coming in, maybe you don't need as much in conservative assets. Now, again, I don't necessarily believe this, but I want to bring that up as a possible option, that you can be more aggressive with the portfolio if most of your spending needs are covered, just because the portfolio doesn't have to cover as much. You're willing to sit through maybe some more ups and downs in the market. The other downside to that is that you also can't use bonds to rebalance. So in the example of the great financial crisis, if stocks were down a lot and you don't have any bonds in your portfolio, you don't have very much, you can't necessarily sell off the bonds that were doing okay during that time to buy stocks when they're at a discount of 30 or 50%, depending on when you decided to buy more of them. It's also worth mentioning that there are incentives for agents to sell annuities. Now, in the example that I'm using here, for the most part, these single premium immediate annuities, commissions tend to be lower, but there still is a commission. Now, there are other types of annuities out there that you could annuitize immediately or later on that might offer a better income source. And that's why it's important to work with a reputable agent to go out and figure out if you're trying to get as much income as possible, what's the best way to do that? It might not be a single premium immediate annuity. It might be a fixed indexed annuity that has a income rider. There are lots of different options out there, and I just want to stress working with the right person who can clearly explain this to you in a way that you make sense of it, in a way that you understand. That way you know what you're buying, because I've worked with a lot of people that we've undone or helped to make sense of what they purchased in the past, and what they purchased is not what they thought they purchased. And that is worth mentioning, to take a moment and really understand what it is you're buying and under what circumstances it provides income, when that income can go up or down, before doing it and not after the fact. Now, if you don't go purchase an annuity, what are the alternatives? Well, we alluded to them earlier. You could keep it in a bank account, not earning very much, so that's probably not an ideal situation. But if you have a ton of money, maybe that's okay. For a lot of people, it means a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds or other types of investments to help support that income. Let's go back to a simple example where, let's say you need $10,000 a month, you're getting $5,000 from Social Security or pension sources, so you have a $5,000 gap. Well, now you need to design a portfolio to get you that $5,000 per month. Now that might be a combination of dividends, interest that pay out, and then selling off some capital gains here and there. So selling stocks or bonds to help support that monthly withdrawal of that $5,000 a month. This is where it's really important to design a financial plan and decide on a withdrawal rate, and make sure that that fits in line with what you're hoping to do throughout your life, and make sure that you can support that and you're comfortable with the investments that you're making. Although it's not guaranteed, and sequence of return is a risk, meaning if you retire and you immediately need to start taking withdrawals from the portfolio, and let's say you're pretty aggressive, that might actually end up having less money through a diversified portfolio, particularly at the outset. But for a lot of people in a normal course of retirement, assuming that they stay invested and they're moderately balanced, for the most part, a lot of those people are going to end up better than people who annuitize, just based on the math. And we'll get into that into a moment, just to look at what the rate of return is for different annuities at different ages. Let's look at a real world example of running an annuity quote to see what the rate of return would be here. So let's go with Jill and John's sample. Here's Jill's date of birth. Here's John's date of birth. We can see their respective ages. And let's say they put in $100,000 into an annuity. What would that pay? Now, you can see here, I've pre-filled the numbers, and I just want to show you where I got those from. There's lots of different online calculators that you can look at here. But one, I went on Schwab here, and you can see that this is 604, and this was for a single life only. So that corresponds to that 604 if they were single, and just doing this on Jill's life, given that she's 64 years old. Now, if they wanted a 100% joint survivor annuity, where if Jill passed away first, this money would go to John for the rest of his life, we can also look at that calculation here. And that's this joint life, where you can see the monthly payment is lower, which makes sense. When you have two lives, usually you're going to get a lower payout than just over one person's life. Just actuarially, that's the way that it works out. Also want to show you a different income source, because we talked about this earlier. What would happen? I ran this on Fidelity's website, because they can have an annual increase within this annuity. And here you can see a pretty similar amount, that $535 for the joint annuity versus $544. So for the most part, very similar, just because insurance companies for the most part are going to price these very similarly, and all these carriers have access to, or I should say all these companies have pretty similar access to the different insurance companies out there. But let's just see what happens here if you were to apply a cost of living adjustment to this annuity. What would that mean in terms of income? Now, you can see we went down to 421 from that 535 roughly. So it's a pretty big hit to the income, and that's why a lot of people don't decide to get these inflation adjustment annuities, and they use their investment portfolio or other assets to help later on when the annuity is not paying as much, because the cost of goods have risen. So let's dive into details now, just so you can see. I pre-built some stuff in terms of spouses' ages, what the internal rate of return looks like if you're to do single or married, and then also the break-even age. I think that this is really important to look at, that you're exchanging $100,000, whether you're single or married, in terms of how you're annuitizing this income. How long will you need to get your own money back, essentially? How many months will you get 544 or 604 back before you reach that 100,000? Well, in the single case, if you're just to do this on Jill's life, it's about age 77 is the break even. For the two of them, it's about age 79, and we can see that down below in this chart. I'll move this. You can see in the first year that they get this, it's pretty negative returns, because if they were to die, they put $100,000 back. They haven't gotten much out of the annuity. Now you can see as time goes on, here's that first break even roughly between 77 and 78, go from negative to a positive rate of return now. And then on the married side, there's that between 79 and age 80, what ends up happening there. And you see that in terms of the annual payment that you put in versus the single, how much you're getting annually. So you can think about this as for the first decade or so or longer, you're really just getting your own money back from the insurance company. It's not until you start to live longer, which is why a lot of people who are concerned about longevity in their family might purchase an annuity. Here's what you can start to see as you get out to age 90. Well, 5.4% rate of return on that single life, that's okay. But I would also say if you're willing to do a diversified portfolio, historically that has done better. There's no guarantee that would do better in the future. But it's not really until you get to start out to later ages where that rate of return starts to look a little bit better. And I think that this is an important rate of return to look at, just because oftentimes when you see annuities quoted, they will often quote a payout rate. So if we were to do this, and let's say you're going to earn that 72.48 per year, you might get something that looks more like this. Take the 72.48 and divide by the $100,000, and they might say, well, we're paying 7.2% out, which I guess that's true, but that's not your actual rate of return. That's important to keep in mind, that 7% is not your rate of return, because I think a lot of people look at it and say, well, 7% guaranteed by the insurance company, that sounds pretty good. But when we actually look at the rate of return here and how long you live, that may or may not be a good option, right? If I said, hey, you're going to get a 1.8% return on Jill's life, given that she lives to age 80, that may not be a great fit, considering that she has no flexibility with that money that she just tied up, and there's no money for heirs if she were to pass away. Now, she could elect a period certain where it pays out for a certain amount, but then she's going to get less per month. Anything that you do to change that to provide more certainty is likely going to lower the payment. So it's really important to do the math on this and make sure that you're comfortable with the rate of return and what you're potentially giving up. I hope you found this helpful. Annuities are really complex out there, which is why it's really important to understand the terms, what you're buying, what the rate of return can look like under different scenarios, and make sure that you're comfortable purchasing it. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel to be notified of future videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.